Friday in Gaza began the way too many days now begin, with people waking up not to routine, but to uncertainty. Streets that once carried school traffic and market noise now carry ambulances, dust, and the sound of aircraft overhead. By the end of the day, at least 12 Palestinians were reported killed across the enclave in a series of Israeli strikes, according to medics and local officials. Among the dead were 6 police officers. That detail matters because it points to more than another deadly day of war. It points to the collapse of civil order inside a territory already pushed to the edge. The strikes were reported in multiple locations. In Gaza City, medics said an Israeli attack killed 3 people, including 2 police officers. In northern Gaza, tank shelling in Beit Lahia killed 2 more. In the south, in Khan Yunis, a separate strike killed 7 people, including 4 police officers. Witnesses said the strike there hit a police vehicle near a wedding hall. Those numbers are small compared with some of the deadliest days of this war, but numbers alone do not tell the real story. When police officers are killed in a place where institutions are already shattered, the consequences spread far beyond the blast site. It affects traffic control, crowd management, aid distribution, crime prevention, emergency coordination, and the fragile systems that keep civilians alive under siege. Gaza's Interior Ministry said the strikes deliberately targeted the police force and were intended to weaken any ability to maintain order. Israel's military confirmed it carried out at least 1 strike in Gaza City. That confirmation came despite repeated references to ceasefire understandings that many civilians had hoped would lower the intensity of attacks. Instead, on the ground, Gaza residents say the reality remains one of constant danger. To understand why the death of police officers carries such weight, it helps to understand what policing means in Gaza right now. In many countries, police are associated with normal governance. In Gaza today, police often become something else entirely. Traffic coordinators near bombed roads, escorts for aid trucks, responders to collapsed buildings, managers of desperate crowds waiting for bread, and the thin line between scarcity and chaos. When food is limited, fuel is scarce, communications are unreliable, and hospitals are overwhelmed, even basic public order becomes a life-saving service. Remove that layer, and everything gets harder. Aid deliveries face looting or crowd surges. Families struggle to move safely. Neighborhood disputes escalate faster. Emergency vehicles lose passage. Fear deepens. That is why Friday's strikes may carry significance beyond the immediate death toll. They come amid a broader pattern in which governance structures inside Gaza have been repeatedly damaged. Municipal buildings, ministries, police compounds, roads, utilities, and administrative systems have all faced pressure during months of war. Critics say this reflects a strategy not only to fight armed groups, but to leave behind a territory with no functioning civilian framework. Israel argues it targets militants and infrastructure linked to armed organizations and that combatants often operate from civilian areas. That claim has been central to many of its operations, but the distinction between military targets and civilian structures has become one of the most contested issues of the war. International observers, aid groups, and legal experts continue to scrutinize whether attacks meet the requirements of distinction, necessity, and proportionality under the laws of war. For civilians in Gaza, those legal debates feel distant compared with the immediate reality. A strike near a wedding hall in Khan Yunis is not experienced as a policy argument. It is experienced as shattered glass, smoke, panic, and names added to mourning lists. The mention of a wedding hall is especially striking. Wedding venues in Gaza, as in many societies, symbolize continuity, family, and normal life. In wartime, they often become shelters, gathering points, or landmarks in neighborhoods transformed by destruction. To hear of a strike near such a place is to hear how war enters spaces once reserved for celebration. Friday's events also reveal the geography of this conflict: Gaza City in the north, Beit Lahia near the northern edge, Khan Yunis in the south. Attacks in all 3 areas signal that danger remains spread across the strip. For residents displaced multiple times, there is little sense of a safe zone. Many families have moved from north to south, then again, only to find the front lines and strike zones shifting around them. That uncertainty has strategic value. Constant movement exhausts civilian populations. It strains aid agencies. It disrupts local leadership. It makes communities harder to organize and harder to recover. There is also a timing factor. Fridays in the Muslim world carry social and religious importance. Families gather when possible. Markets may be active. Community rhythms center around prayer. Violence on such a day can carry added emotional weight. It becomes not only another strike, but another interruption of spiritual and family life. The police dimension raises another layer. Who governs Gaza after the fighting? This question has haunted diplomats for months. If current structures are weakened or removed, what replaces them? International administrators, a reformed Palestinian Authority presence, local committees, outside security forces. None of these options are simple. All face political resistance. And every strike that removes administrators, officers, or civil servants makes the transition harder. This is where battlefield tactics meet long-term politics. A destroyed vehicle can become a governance vacuum. A dead officer can become an unanswered question about who directs traffic tomorrow, who guards a bakery line next week, who coordinates evacuations next month. Across the region, governments are watching closely. Arab states have repeatedly warned that military action without a political plan creates only deeper instability. Western allies of Israel continue balancing support for Israeli security with increasing concern over humanitarian costs. The United Nations and aid organizations warn that social collapse can trigger long-term consequences that outlast military campaigns. There is also the information war. Official statements often focus on targets, operational goals, and security threats. Local accounts focus on neighborhoods, funerals, shortages, and names of the dead. These narratives compete globally every day. One side speaks in strategic language, the other speaks in lived experience. Audiences around the world absorb both, often through fragmented images and incomplete facts. That gap matters because public opinion increasingly shapes diplomacy. Pressure from voters has affected debates in Washington, London, Brussels, and beyond. Calls for ceasefires, arms reviews, sanctions, hostage deals, or reconstruction planning often rise after civilian casualty reports and widely shared images from Gaza. Inside Israel, the war remains tied to security concerns, hostage negotiations, domestic politics, and trauma from the October attacks that triggered this phase of conflict. Many Israelis view continued operations as necessary to dismantle armed threats. Others argue that military pressure without a durable political settlement risks endless war and further isolation. Inside Gaza, the conversation is far more immediate. Survival, shelter, medicine, water, and whether institutions still exist enough to help people through the next week. Friday's reported death toll of 12 may not dominate global headlines in a war marked by far larger casualty counts. But stories like this often reveal the deeper mechanics of conflict. It is not only about who controls territory, it is about whether civilian life can function at all. When police officers are killed, roads become harder to manage, crowds become harder to protect, aid becomes harder to deliver, trust in order weakens, criminal opportunism can rise, panic can spread faster than official information. In a besieged enclave, these are not secondary issues. They are central to survival. And then there is the human scale. Each person killed had relationships, routines, unfinished plans. The public language of war often compresses people into categories: officer, civilian, target, casualty. But families do not mourn categories, they mourn individuals. As night fell Friday, Gaza's map had changed again in small but painful ways. Another vehicle destroyed, more families grieving, more public servants gone, more uncertainty about what remains functional tomorrow morning. The broader war continues to be measured in military objectives, diplomatic statements, and strategic calculations. Yet days like this show another measure of conflict, the slow dismantling of ordinary life. That may be the most consequential battlefield of all. Not the front line seen in maps and briefings, but the daily systems that allow a trapped population to endure. Once those systems break, rebuilding them can take years, even if the bombs stop tomorrow. So Friday's strikes were not only another deadly episode, they were another signal that in Gaza, governance itself has become part of the war.